Welcome to the Field Lab podcast. We know that you're all here because you're passionate about health, learning about true health. Maybe it's keeping your health, maybe it's finding your health, maybe it's helping someone else with their health. We all have different reasons why we're here. If you run a human day connected to a really good environment that's filled with light, water, magnetism, that's filled with love and community, that is how humans default to health. Take a moment and think about this question. What is food? At first, the answer may seem obvious. Food is energy, fuel, and raw materials, a source of macronutrients and micronutrients, purely biochemical. And this answer isn't wrong, but it barely begins to scratch the surface of the deeper truth, the one buried in the biophysics. When you journey down to the level of electrons and protons, you quickly realize that food is so much more than energy, nutrients, or biochemistry. It's information, and it actually tells your mitochondria where they are in space and time. How? Well, that is the question we set out to answer in today's episode. In part one, we try to break the paradigm of food as a purely energetic biochemical story. We detail where that idea came from, where it falls short, and how to reframe your thinking around food to support your deeper health. In part two, which is available exclusively to premium members, we hang out at the cell level, looking at food from the perspective of the mitochondria, how they use the information in food to fine-tune function, where the information is buried, and the practical implications of what and when to eat. If you'd like to hear this discussion, there is a link in the show notes to become a member. Now for the conversation.
So I think it's fair to say that 99% of people in the year 2026 think food is everything. And they often come to us wondering what diet they should be doing or what they need to do from a food perspective to get their health back. But I would say our modern understanding of food is very skewed and not at all representative of what nature tells us food is. So can you kind of tell us, it sounds like a crazy question, but what is food and what are the maybe the two schools of thought about food?
Yeah, so we're kind of hoping most people are getting to this podcast maybe after listening to our calorie podcast.
Hmm.
It's the extension of that conversation that food has really found its way in the functional medicine world, which of course, many people find us because in the bigger umbrella, it may appear that like we live under that umbrella. So a lot of patients come to us thinking food is the answer to health, and that's been very developed by a biochemistry-based model.
Hmm.
But it's important to answer that question, like, what is food? Food does have biochemistry, but food also has a biophysical nature, and that doesn't mean, though, food is everything that provides health to humans,
Right.
because there's definitely a growing sense in the world of functional medicine that there is a biophysics side to food. I think we're seeing that. Interestingly, like this week, there was released a documentary called Pharmacy of Light.
Yep.
I was going to say food because I'm surprised
It's
that
on
they
the
use
brain.
that. But yes, Pharmacy of Light. And there was a brief moment seeing the little snippets of Milan Ho and Fritz Pop and Zach Bush talking about biophysics that seemed like moments isolated from the biophysics of food that gave me some hope.
Looked promising for
But
a sec.
then the whole documentary was really, truly selling the biophysics of food to people as ultimately like what will heal this human disease crisis.
Mhm.
And it's not to say that food doesn't matter. And that's what this conversation's about, that food to us is information. It is both biochemistry and biophysics, but the food information is really what's valuable to us as humans and was just an extension of what we were supposed to then be getting energetically and information wise from nature
Mhm.
to then create this abundant opportunity for humans to be able to get free information that didn't have to be metabolically processed like food from light and magnetism and water. The food was just an extension of that to provide additional information. And gosh, like humans just have so much potential,
Mhm.
but it requires you to then be really in flow with the entire decentralized network of nature,
Right.
including the food,
Mhm.
but not only about food.
Right. So food's only been viewed through the biochemical lens historically.
Historically.
Right.
So I think we can go into the history of food,
Mm.
and food was very purposely sold to the public as biochemistry. And that was
Is that
easy to do. That
is
was
that like
easy to do. You take food,
yeah.
burn it in a chamber, capture the energy, call it calories. And the reality of our macroscopic world is we can see that food has calories. And that's, again, that was like our last conversation, that is the macro state. It's just not the micro state of what our body's actually doing with the food.
Mhm.
And so then that was very much the way of thinking from all like science. It's sort of what we then created all of the public health information around.
Mhm.
Gosh, the 70s became the controlling the food story. Now it's just reminding me of that book Fiat Food, which again, like I loved that book, but it still kind of sold the story that all things went bad for health when the food went bad. And that was tied to the money going bad, American money going bad in 1971. And there's absolutely a story there,
Mhm.
but the deeper story is the biophysics of the human was already degrading. So then how do you really further manipulate human health? Well, then you also erode the food.
Mhm.
And now once the food is no longer information, once humans are no longer getting information from planet Earth, now you've got humans that are literally just living off of whatever redox potential they have to
Mhm.
survive
Right.
until one dies. Now, that sounds pretty okay. That sounds like really doom and gloom, but it is really what we see, which is why it is frustrating to us that this conversation tends to generally come back to the food, which sort of got us to this conversation of like, here was this one moment where there was a glimpse of light
Right.
that literally like there's so much within that documentary that is like pieces and parts of this bigger story. But Maywan Ho and Fritz Pop, like the real value of their research was not about this food story.
I think they'd be pretty disappointed.
I wonder. I don't know. That was what I got after watching is that I'm not really sure Maywan Ho. I mean, it sounds. I don't know if
Who
she would be
knows?
really happy with that part of the message being all that was taken from what she learned and, wrote about it in The Rainbow and the Worm.
I know. What
Like
a
it's
disservice to that book.
kind of like really, if you read Rainbow and the Worm, gosh, you realize like humans are this amazing biophysical living organism that really creates uniqueness, like so much more interesting than food.
Right.
But it still makes food a relevant story because humans are required to eat food. And this is sort of the deeper history of mammals that when you change a complex system to run on time and information and not just on energy, which, we're going to go deeper into part two on the biophysics side, but humans are complex living systems that run very unique in that the system runs on time and entropy and information. We are not running on pure energy alone.
Mhm.
We are not running on this pure idea that a food burns calories and that's really running the body. That is what like Maywan Ho and others
Mhm.
very clearly defined for us. Like this is why I would say I should be disappointed that there's so much more. And then humans aren't just running on the light that
Mhm.
is embedded in food. That's not true either.
Right.
That is not a thermodynamic balancing equation either.
No, it doesn't make any sense.
But the bigger story is that, there's food, there is energy in food. No doubt.
Mhm.
There is energy in food, but there's also information in food. And there's a deeper story of the biophysics, which is the protons and the electrons. And then what's really happening once the food gets into the human is now a proton and an electron
Okay.
story. It's not a calorie story. It's not a carbohydrate, fat, protein story. Once it's in the body, those ideas go away.
Mhm.
Now it becomes protons, specifically hydrogen, proton, the deuterium and protium side, which we're going to do definitely in part two. That's very important and has a lot to do with seasonal eating and everything. But then there's also an electron story. And that's also deeper biophysics that now you have electrons that are spinning. There's way more information buried in these electrons than we're really giving the food credit for.
Mhm.
And now these electrons that are coming from food that has been built with photosynthesis. If you're an animal and you're eating plants built on photosynthesis, you can see where these electrons now have this memory. And it's that part that's being interpreted by the human metabolism and ultimately then shuttled to the mitochondria to do the real work.
Okay.
So we're going to say biochemistry, there's an energy story, but there's a deeper biophysics based story of protons and electrons and spin. And now the quantum biophysical side that really is the magic of what's happening in the human. And why food matters for the human is that, again, we're a complex system that actually decentralized quite fully, that we don't have to run 100% on sunlight.
Mhm.
And technically, we don't. I
Right.
mean, we can see throughout human history, we're not plants, our feet are not buried in the ground. So that disconnection, though, then, nature, the decision of a decentralized network is that if you can decentralize fully, build then a biophotonic, a light-based network in you,
Mhm.
well, now you can interact with your environment in other ways
Right.
by moving and trying out different environments, but that you would have to provide a little bit of information about your environment that helps to recalibrate that internal
Hmm.
decentralized network of your mitochondria.
Right.
Did that by then being able to take in the food that then gives very specific information about one's environment.
Mhm.
Again, assuming that you're eating food from your environment,
Right.
which again, like this is the complex story of food, is that food is actually really simple. Like
Mm.
food, if you were to just do a simple thought experiment, like it should be go look outside. What is growing in your environment? That is a food that you as a human was designed to eat. That food would be grown under the same light that you're growing under.
Right.
Again, assuming that you've gone outside and you've been out there during the hours of sunlight.
Mhm.
All of that light driven information and the magnetic field of the earth where you are, the Schumann resonance, everything about you in your environment is the same imprint on that food
Right.
that then you were designed to eat.
Hmm.
Now, that was really so simple when humans didn't have just complex cultures, right? Like,
Right.
we didn't,
Access to
yeah, there weren't
everything.
that many humans. Like, gosh, this was all part of this whole where we are now is, I mean, gosh, it wasn't that long ago, and there weren't as many humans as there are now. So of
Right.
course you have to build systems. I shouldn't say of course, but the way we've modernized things is we literally built human cultures that then cannot function on their own.
Hmm.
That you have to go to the grocery store if you want to survive. But then that really disconnects food even more from this biophysical story
Right. So food as information means that it's fundamentally electrons and protons.
that have information that can
Yes.
then be
To find
sensed inside the body.
to fine tune you to your environment to be optimal for the situation that you're in.
Yeah, that if you really understand like what is happening from then parsing out these electrons and protons, where's that going to work within your complex, your atomic design, your dissipated design, your structure. Like the actual, reality is like we know you are a real person.
Right.
You're at Noah.
Mhm.
Like what is your body need? And how is it being tuned by your environment that maybe you might be more optimized for certain environments that I'm optimized for.
Right.
But the idea there is that food could help tinker and fine tune
Mhm.
your mitochondria to then optimize your energy and redox potential, like becoming then this storage of information and time for your future self. Like,
Right.
wouldn't that make sense that mammals were the ultimate expression of this like beautiful decentralized design of potential
Mhm.
that we were able to use environments and then food grown in those environments to then take all of that information to do something with.
It's pretty wild,
It is actually really
but it could
cool.
only work that way. It's actually kind of a disservice to get stuck at the biochemical level because it's not nearly as interesting as all of this.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's a good point that I still think like in school, gosh, I love nutritional
Imagine if you learn
biochemistry.
how
I
that
wish
food is information.
I always go back and think, man, I just like I remember my nutritional biochemistry, the first class I ever took, and I saw that story laid out. I remember thinking that was so cool, and I had bought the poster, and I had it on my wall, and you could see all the biochemical pathways, and I think I loved it because it just really felt like, gosh, we can know
Yeah.
health.
Mhm.
And that as somebody who at that point was like planning to work with humans in health, it was really comfortable
Mhm.
to then be able to realize, like, I can learn this. I can know these things. I can then use this to teach my patients, and I will know health. I will impart health on them. And wow, that's going to feel really rewarding.
Right.
And that truly, I mean, I can say I thrived in that for years, in that I really was a true, like, food-focused functional medicine, biochemistry based, and it worked for a little bit.
Yeah, got results.
It worked for a little bit until it didn't,
Mhm.
and I know that I always say, like, it was definitely in that 2012, 2013, definitely by 2015, um, that it was starting to go bad.
Mhm.
Like, it was starting to not move the needle. It was not working like it was before. Then it was just more restriction. It must be more food allergies. It must mean you need better exercise. You might need CrossFit, like, and then that was the model of like always chasing health, more data. Then it became like the biohackers.
Right.
And then I think that whole time really drove then the solidification of biochemistry, because
Mhm.
then it became calories, then it became macro. So everything just stayed tied to calories,
Food,
fats,
food,
and
food.
proteins. And I can say I never thought about it ever in a different way
Mhm.
until I read the one blog post by Dr. Jack Cruz and I don't know what year it was exactly. Um, I shouldn't say this. I know I initially read it and had no idea what it even meant because when my brain was so focused on carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, and because his original book was sort of written weirdly, I look back and, I read it differently now, but when you're a brain that sees and understands through calories and macros and biochemistry, you read that book a certain way.
Right. It's your filter.
Yeah, but I think because of I just needed more time working with patients, definitely after a good decade of working with patients and realizing that didn't always work, me being a real, a doctor trying to do the art of medicine, understanding you have to shift and change the way of thinking sometimes. If reality doesn't line up with what you're doing, you have to realize there's something wrong with the
Right.
paradigm.
Hmm.
So that was when there was a moment where it finally clicked for me that food was electrons, food was information. And it was probably really paired with a lot of my learning of deuterium. This was that 2017 timestamp. And then it really took a few years of learning biophysics because it had never come into my knowing.
Hmm.
And then it was after that that, I was really able to kind of around 2020, like put it into my practice.
Right.
But again, you can see where this is why it's so difficult for anyone to disconnect from this story,
100%.
because if you're just living your normal life, you're not seeing hundreds and thousands of patients, like
Hmm.
you're not really seeing this play out. You're not realizing people aren't responding. Like you're not it's just we're so far removed from this being a story that humans are hearing that we just hope that this is one more opportunity to then make people think
Yeah.
different.
Challenge the paradigm.
Yes, and realize that hopefully this is interesting enough that then our part 2 of the biophysics of food would be interesting to more people. We know it's not interesting to everybody. We
That's fine.
yeah, like
Yeah.
I know we think that like we geek out on this and it's so interesting. It surprises us sometimes when people are like, I don't really need to
Just
know
tell me
that.
what to
Like,
do.
tell me what
Yeah.
to do.
Right.
But I also think that more people have to learn the biophysics side.
Hmm.
More young people need to learn the biophysics side because we have to break this down. And then
Mm.
if documentaries like The Pharmacy of Light are staying food focused
Hmm.
and selling the public that healthy food is going to fix our human health problem, it's not gonna happen.
Right.
I know we always say, like, I wish that were all of the truth.
It would make life much easier.
It would make life much easier,
Hmm.
but you cannot grow organic, regenerative food on a plot of land in the middle of Orange County that's the last organic plot of land according to the people in the documentary and think that everything about that environment hasn't influenced that food. I mean, I push back and I listened to it and said, well, gosh, that's where the highest rates of autism are.
Exactly.
What does
It's like
that
the worst
mean?
environment in the country.
Yeah, so if you're following along and you realize, gosh, like humans there are connecting to a really bad environmental message, how do we think the food is not?
Right.
I mean, that's the pushback there.
Hmm.
Now, if you understand the food still has to be watered, and the water table in California is just rotted
Hmm.
and filled with deuterium, does organic mean anything at that point?
No, it's an oxymoron to say organic
It
in
is.
California.
So, I mean, I don't wanna, like, there's so much more to talk about there, but this is where it's disappointing that,
Hmm.
people like Zach Bush do really know this deeper mitochondrial story. It really appears to be the case. We know Maewon Ho and Fritz Pop, if you really follow along their research, they might not have fully understood the complexity of like deuterium and protium and biochemistry because some of like Laszlo Borosh's studies that revealed that came after, Mae-Wan Ho's. So
Right.
again, like it wasn't really her research happened before we knew that what the biochemistry was doing, which again we're gonna like talk about like how that hops the deuterium and cleans out the system for your mitochondria to have clean information. But that just reveals the impossibility of thinking that a little plot of land grown in a really terrible environment is going to offer the solution for human health. And then if we stay distracted in that, then we lose more ground.
Hmm.
How long are we going to stay stuck in this paradigm where, what will happen in 10 years? It's like that we're never going to gain any traction if the biophysics story like doesn't get applied to humans
In its full truth too.
in its full truth.
Mhm.
Yes. Like that humans innately need to be running the same story they're talking about light there, like it
Right.
needs to be applied
From
to
source.
human selves,
Right.
humans connected. I mean, in that video, everyone's wearing sunglasses
It's wild.
and yeah, and probably their plastic clothes and it's just mind-blowing to me that you can be so close to the truth.
Hmm.
And again, like it's just what we know right now. I'm sure there's so much that we don't know,
Right.
but we definitely know there is enough knowledge currently in 2026 that humans run a biophysics-based network for health,
Hmm.
that the fact that that cannot find its way to the public through documentaries like this that are so close and actually seem to lay out bits and pieces of it purposely, but enough to then distract and stay really on the food focused paradigm, that I just worry for any human trying to find health. Where will you ever find it in current times if you don't want to just band-aid it with drugs and supplements? If you are trying to find it by eating better food, it's you're just gonna spin your tires. Like
Right.
it it is important, but it's a small piece of this bigger story. And actually, it's so easy that it shouldn't even really be a relevant conversation in
Mhm.
that what is really the simplicity? Eat local food. Now, you have to be aware though of your local environment.
Right.
So you have to make really good decisions for yourself of, if you want health, are you living in an environment that's optimized for health?
Hmm.
And that's way deeper than a food story.
Right. And it also means that fruits and vegetables are probably not healthy 365 days a year. If you look at it from that information seasonal
Yeah.
perspective, you need to shift with the light cycle. And if you move against it, bad things are going to happen,
Right.
unfortunately.
And then where's it coming from? Did you source it
Hmm.
that was just picked? Like, was it in the supermarket? Was it
Right.
picked early and nitrogen used to ripen it? I mean, you can see how easy it is to just alter this food story,
Hmm.
but also to then make the public think that like this, like what this documentary is saying is like the answer. Well, I would not disagree at all. When humans grew a lot of their own food, it just also happened to be at a time when humans had more redox potential.
There's a way bigger
We
story.
did not have this tech story. Like the whole history is elegant when again it's laid out by this documentary that
Mhm.
I think it was 40% of Americans like grew their own food after World War II, and like there was so much of that happening, but we are not living in an environment at all like World War II,
No, totally different.
coming off of World War II.
Right.
And then if you use that to really create a way of thinking about food,
Hmm.
it does destroy the deeper story of what is a biophysics-based human tell us? we need to be aware of our environment.
Right.
What is our light environment? What is our magnetic environment?
Mhm.
What does our water table look like? If you don't know those things, you really cannot make educated
Yeah,
decisions
informed
about
decisions.
how to support your health at all.
Right.
Now, should food be a gateway to that level of understanding? Absolutely.
I think it
That's
often
like,
is.
yeah, that's like, but no, it's often not, right? That
Yeah.
you can get this pharmacy of light and then realize like, gosh, it was so close.
Right. Yeah.
I think it should be.
Right. Yeah.
Like it should be such an easy leap
Mhm.
that you should be able to understand this and
Right.
then maybe watch that
Right.
and then
Don't get stuck there though.
go to our deeper dive and realize, gosh, if I just heard
Mm.
that, it would clarify so much. And then you would never eat a banana in the
Right.
middle. You would never eat a banana if you lived in Connecticut.
Right.
You would definitely never eat a banana in a supermarket. You would never eat a banana in the middle of the winter. Like you just wouldn't do it.
Mhm.
I feel very strongly about that. After working with a lot of patients who, once you truly understand what we're saying, you wouldn't do it. It just would make no sense to make a choice to potentially put in a piece of food information that is not being understood by your mitochondria. And now the same food, well, I should use something that we would have here. The blueberry that I would pick in a couple weeks from my local farm,
Mhm.
I would never eat in the middle of the winter
Right.
because my mitochondria would see that as a toxin in the middle of the winter,
Mhm.
but it would see it as a healthful piece of information in the middle of the summer.
Totally different.
And this is where, gosh, if we just got patients and people to this level of understanding, it would be almost easy.
Mhm. Yeah, I
It
think it
would, yeah.
simplifies things a
And
little
then it
bit.
would just save us time because this is the big thing. It's like talking about food, the food books and
Mhm.
the food and even just right now, like we're in times of like the Maha movement, it's all food based. What a terrible distraction from the actual real story is that human health is in massive decline because the environment that we're living in is declining.
Right.
And if you do not wake up and understand that story and realize food is not fixing any of this situation, it's important to get right, but it's so simple that it shouldn't really be taking a lot of your time.
Right.
I hope that our deep dive part 2 will get us to that
Gotcha.
conversation.
So what should somebody take away from this conversation?
So I think it's important that if this like resonates with you, then you owe it to yourself to learn about deuterium and hydrogen isotopes. You owe it to yourself to learn that electrons are spinning. Like you owe it to
Some
yourself
information theory.
to realize your biochemical pathways are there to clean out deuterium so that way your mitochondria can operate in a low deuterium depleted water environment. Like really truly all humans should have that level of understanding. If everyone had that level of understanding, it would blow up the westernized, centralized medical paradigm and allow it maybe to do what it should be doing,
Mhm.
which is some cool stuff
Yeah.
that thank God it's there for emergencies and thank God it's there for certain moments.
Mhm.
But one thing is very clear, westernized, centralized medicine has no solution for the decline of human health because it's purposely kept everyone out of a biophysics-based model. Even this little inkling of food biophysically will get nobody anywhere
Right.
because if you listen to this, start eating some real food, but ultimately have a really poor redox potential. The biophysics of you is trashed.
Mhm.
Plus, there was not the distinction in the video that there was seasonal food light
That's what I thought
information.
was so disappointing.
That already
How do you
disappointing.
miss that part of the
There's
story?
enough that's missing that will keep people then disappointed,
Mhm.
which I would say will then allow people to say, well, gosh, if that worked, I would have noticed something.
Mhm.
So then they will always, I think it's always purposely to flip back to a more centralized way of thinking that maybe my only solution will be to take a GLP-1.
Right. We
And
always
and
get
that's
there.
yeah, so is that then the playbook
Mhm.
that, "Don't worry, you know what? We got a
Got
solution for you."
gotcha.
And then that should be another conversation is then how does all of this calories, food, biochemistry based, like, then lead to none of that's working,
Mhm.
so you perceive that you need then a
The
drug
drug.
for weight loss.
Right.
Um, and it's an easy playbook. It's so
Unfortunately.
easy to see as someone who stepped outside of the biochemistry-based model that I hope we can wake more people up to this conversation that really it's probably tying it all the way back, it's not the fiat food by itself, it's the fiat health
Mhm. It's the whole
story.
system.
It's the whole system that over enough time has gotten us to here where humans are so disconnected from the understanding that matters most that we just cannot then transform our health.
Right. So a takeaway is educate yourself, kind of unlearn to relearn and
And then work toward
yeah.
putting yourself in experience to transform.
Yeah, do it.
Because you can learn, but do it.
Mhm.
If you still eat not seasonal food in the middle of the winter, you'll never see the fruits of that.
Right.
You won't.
Mhm.
So that's really critical is that unless you can truly do that experiment, you can't actually understand what we're saying. And it doesn't mean you necessarily have to go that deep in the weeds initially, but it also is really important that if this is hard to believe, well, until you fully embrace biophysics, you cannot really make an educated decision about what we're saying
Mhm.
unless you actually do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Good. That's a good spot to end on.
Photosynthesis we know is quantum biophysical.
Right.
That's been very well known in the science space, yet human photosynthesis not allowed to exist, is
Totally.
not agreed upon,
Yeah.
yet has been vetted out, has been revealed, has been talked about. If you understand what we're saying, you have to understand that food is ultimately information arriving to your mitochondria as protons and electrons. Our body then is trying to use that to help shift our binary code, but then also taking in that stored light information and doing something with it with our own electrons. Like it's really
Wild.
cool. So maybe the 30-year-old now that's starting to have trouble and may perceive that food matters and may perceive that calories matter, where before it was the 50-year-old.
To me, the food is information message is so freeing because,
Right.
I mean, we see so many patients who a gigantic portion of their life is really all about diet. That's all they
Yeah,
think about.
and what do I eat? What do I eat? I'm so confused with what to eat.
Yeah.
And it traps you. It's so time consuming. And it's really, I think it's only really easy to see when you step outside of it.